Let me just get started. So, hello everybody. Today I am on a podcast with Teng Biao. I know I already had you on before, but just introduce yourself again.
Okay, my name is Teng Biao. I'm an academic lawyer and human rights activist from China.
Okay, so the last time that I had you on here, I thought it was incredibly interesting to hear your story about what actually happened when you were in China. And you talked a little bit about it, but you didn't talk that much about it. So can you give a little, pretty much your life story of what happened when you, from the time that you grew up to the time that you sort of, realized that you were sort of being brainwashed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was born in a very poor family in northeast China, Jilin province. My parents, my grandparents are farmers, and so in my childhood, I experienced the kind of extreme poverty. And when I grew up, I went to the primary school and middle school, high schools, but I never met a teacher or student or scholar who were critical of the Communist Party or the Chinese government. And I had no chance to read a book besides the textbooks. And almost all the teachers are also brainwashed, and they believe everything of the communist propaganda. And so it seemed that the only one purpose of the teaching and the whole education before high school was to enter a university. And it's very, very difficult. Before early 1990s, it's very, very difficult to get accepted by a university. In rural areas, it's even more difficult. Actually, like less than 1% of the students in rural area could go to a university. So the teachers only focus on the textbooks, on the how to pass the examinations, how to get a good score, and they don't talk about politics or human rights or history. And we do have the political classes, but it's kind of compulsory political courses, and we were told to memorize the theories of the Marxism, Leninism, Maoism. That's exactly the communist propaganda. And
so did you guys end up? Did you guys learn at all about anything about capitalism or Western ideas or anything like that, or was it all Marxism, Leninism, Stalinism, things like that?
We before entering the college, we don't have any idea of the Western democracy, Western liberalism. But we did talk about capitalism, but the capitalism is the enemy of socialism, communism. So every time we discuss about capitalism is kind of uh, representing a bad idea, uh, no counter-revolutionary ideology. So we have to be criticizing the idea of capitalism.
Mm. So, where along the lines of um, the Chinese economic system does capitalism fall? Is it like they're leaning? They have some capitalistic parts of them, correct?
Yeah, that's after 1980s, especially in mid 1990s. Mao Zedong died in 1976. Before that, it was typical totalitarianism, typical kind of socialism, communism, and then the Chinese government had a policy of reform and opening up. And in mid 1990s, the Chinese Communist Party adopted a policy of socialist market economy. And of course, we had more and more market economy, more and more elements belonging to capitalism. But the official ideology, official theories never admit that China is going towards capitalism. They said we according to Deng Xiaoping, the communist leader who played the most significant role in the adoption of socialist market economy. He said the capitalist countries can have market, and socialist countries can also have market. So we have market, the party-controlled market economy, but we never acknowledge that China is going towards capitalism. Yeah, and even though many scholars, Western scholars, describe China after 1990s as crony capitalism or like red capitalism, like that. Yeah.
Well, have you heard about? So I know that what they have in their countries, they have 51% of all businesses are owned by the government, right? And a large part of every single thing that they do is they want to make sure that things are always inflated. They inflate their numbers on their GDP, right? So when they report how much money, how much output they made, and when it's really 2%, they'll put 6%. Just to make sure their numbers are inflated. And then also the fact that they make sure all of the sort of the problems that are being put forward by the government that are kind of being caused. For example, did you ever hear about the real estate bubble that exists in China? The fact that there are 50 million homes that are unowned or unoccupied in China?
Yeah, of course. I'm no expert in economics, but everyone talks about the economic bubbles, the stock market, the real estate, the debt bubble. So it's one of the most serious problem that the Chinese economy is facing. And this kind of development model is not sustainable. So of course, it's the fact that China has become the second largest economy, and the vast majority of Chinese people has become like richer than before, um, but it's very problematic. Behind the so-called China's economic miracle, I've written an article titled "The Shadow of the Shadow of the China Miracle." So the bubbles is only one thing, and there are some uh, other flaws or negative aspects behind the China's rapid economic growth. For example, the pervasive corruption, the human rights and rule of law being eroded, and it's even deteriorating, and the environmental degradation, and the conflicts between the people and the government. Um, um, so this kind of model is not sustainable, and many people are suffering from the so-called China model. And one thing is the disparity, the inequality. So China has one of the biggest Gini coefficient. The gap between the poor and the rich is becoming bigger. So as I always said, China is not only the least free countries, one of the least free countries, but also one of the least equal countries.
So do they have any type of welfare state like the United States have, where, you know, anyone who's poor sort of has the means to live and things of that sort?
Very limited. The social welfare, first, it's very, very little, very limited. Second, it's distributed unfairly. So one of the prominent professors in China, Qin Hui, had a concept, menace welfare. That means the welfare in any country. The social welfare means the government takes wealth from the richest people and redistribute it to the poor. But in China, it's managed welfare. The government took away the wealth, the tax, more from the poor people, and the privileged people, the rich people, got more benefited from the welfare system. Wow. That's extremely ridiculous.
Wait, how did they do that? Did they take taxes from the bottom percent?
No, we if you see the tax laws, that's normal. That's like the United States and other countries. That's not a big question. But the rich people, the billionaires, the privileged people in China, most of the rich people have good connections with the party officials and government officials, so they have every power to evade the tax, to avoid the tax and the fees. And then they have every power to be benefited more from the social welfare, like the health insurance. One example is the government officials, including the retired government officials, they get very very good health care once they are ill, but the poor people can't afford the basic, the fundamental Medicare.
So do you see any parallels? Because I know that's a huge debate in Americas. Do you see any parallels between the Gini coefficient and the inequality of wealth in America and also the inequality of healthcare in America? Do you compare that with China, or is it so completely different that they're not even comparable?
First, the two countries have very different political arrangement, and the United States is a free democratic country, and of course it has some problems, social, political, and cultural problems, like the racial issues, but China has a very different system. It's a dictatorship. People have no right to vote, and people have no freedom of expression. And China has no political parties other than the Communist Party. So it's very very different. And in the United States, the social equality is a problem too. I don't know the coefficient, but for many countries, countries in the world, because of the globalization and the development of high technology, the internet economy, the Gini coefficient is increasing in many countries.
Oh, okay. So,
but democracies.
so it is super interesting how the United States is very set up, sort of in that fashion. Do you think that just like China, the United States is sort of ran by few instead of ran by many? Or do you believe that because we set up this nice democratic system, that instead it's ran by the masses instead of in China, how it's ran by sort of the richest people and the people in the Communist Party?
Yeah, the modern democracy is representative democratic system, so it can be ruled directly by the people, by the mass. So people have the opportunity to elect their government centrally and locally, and then they have separation of powers, independent judicial system, and they have free press, they have civil society NGOs. So they have various methods to monitor the government, the practice of laws and policies.
So yeah, going back to that, on the free speech.
But in China is yeah.
What's up? Okay, so going back on the free speech topic, do you think that the people in China do you think they know that they're being oppressed currently, or do you think that they believe that that is sort of the best life that is set out for them?
In the ordinary people?
Yeah.
Or the it's a little bit complicated. Chinese government controls the media, the information, the internet very strictly. So most people have been brainwashed, and they don't have independent thinking. They believe everything the Communist Party tells them. So don't they they think that the China model is good. Maybe it's better than every other country. But in since 1980s, there had been a limited space for the civil society. Some books about the Western democracy and liberalism have been translated into Chinese and published in China, and the idea of Western liberalism spread quickly in 1990s. And then because of the development of internet, many people got the chance to access to the filtered, the censored information. So some people, especially the intellectuals and the young students, they accepted the idea of Western democracy and the liberalism, and then they realized that they have been cheated for many years, and they don't, of course, they gradually don't believe in the communist propaganda, and of course they can feel the suppression of this one party system. So but these people are not the majority, and then in 2013, Xi Jinping became the president. So Xi Jinping and the Communist Party sensed the threat from the internet and from the civil society, so they started tightening its control, and then it's more difficult than in 1990s and early 2000s for the ordinary Chinese people to be enlightened.
So why do you believe that even in the 1990s, I assume that it was after Mao Zedong's death, right? That that was the reason that they did it. But why do you think it was that they started opening up the literature so that people started seeing Western ideas, right? I feel like that's very uncharacteristic of a communist government.
Mao Zedong ruled China between 1949 and 1976, and he initiated waves of political movement, the mass mobilization, and he persecuted tens of millions of Chinese people. And then the Cultural Revolution, so it destroyed everything, and the political instability, the economic crisis. So the Communist Party was facing a ruling crisis, facing a fundamental legitimacy crisis. So if Deng Xiaoping and the Communist Party didn't adopt a policy of reform and opening up, the Communist Party may have lost the power. So so we should say, on the one hand, the opening and reform policy is good for the Chinese people, but the aim of these policies are not bring not to bring good to the Chinese people, but to avoid political crisis.
That's so interesting.
And the purpose is to maintain and perpetuate the one party rule.
So pretty much, are you saying that in the 90s, China was losing a lot of power and legitimacy because of Mao Zedong, and they said
1970s, before late 1970s.
Yeah. So, are you saying that after that they started losing legitimacy, and now they're pretty much back in terms of legitimacy and political power? And is that because of our economic ties with them and their strong economic growth?
It seems to be a double-edged sword. On the one hand, the market economy and the rapid economic growth bring more space, of course, bring wealth to China and more space to the society, and people could enjoy more freedom and rights than in Mao Zedong era, which was a humanitarian disaster. Even though China today has one of the worst human rights record, it is better, obviously better than Mao Zedong era, and but the market economy, the internet, the globalization, and the development of legal professions also have other effects that the Communist Party is not willing to see. More and more people access the Western ideas, and they demand more democracy, and people could, like me, human rights lawyers, could use the existing constitution and legal system to defend rights and freedom, internet make it easier for the society to spread information and to mobilize a movement. So all these things are the side effects the Communist Party don't want to see and don't want to accept. So we have seen for the past 6-7 years the Communist Party try their best to tighten its control, the high technologies. I call the current China as a high-tech totalitarian system. The Communist Party utilizes the high technology to strengthen its control on society, like the facial recognition, DNA, artificial intelligence, and big data. All these things were used by Chinese authorities.
So, do you think that the Chinese government, right? Like, I think we could both accept that is sort of like an evil, right? Like an evil thing to go and restrict the freedom of speech and take all these drastic measures to go and do it. Do you think that the Chinese government really believes that they're doing something that is evil? Or do you think that they're doing it out of, a good heart and they feel like it's necessary for a flourishing society?
They don't care. We might say before 1949, when the People's Republic of China was established, some of the Communist Party members were idealist, and they want a better China. They want a democratic China, um, but unfortunately the whole party was an evil party. The whole party. Established and strengthened the totalitarian system, and tens of millions of Chinese people were killed, were massacred. Now, I think we can say the history has proven that the communist system is wrong, and the history and the modern the reality have shown that the political system in Western democracies is much better and much desirable than the dictatorship, than the one-party system. But the Communist Party today doesn't care that it's evil or not. The only thing they care, the only thing they prioritize, is to maintain and to perpetuate their monopoly of power.
So do you think there obviously in this country, in America, there is a tremendous push towards the left? I know that a large part of the push is very, democratic socialists in terms of Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and those people don't believe in getting rid of capitalism. But there is a small push in the country of people who are very against capitalism and believe that a sort of socialistic country is a better future for America. And a big part of it is that they believe that places like China, places like Stalinist Russia, and the Socialist Party in Germany, those places weren't real socialism or real communism or real Marxism or real Leninism. So what would you have to say for someone to say, look at all the evidence of what happened in the 19th century or 1900s. Here's the dangers of communism, socialism, Leninism, Marxism, whatever you want to call it. And we shouldn't try that here. Or is there a legitimate case to be said that it wasn't real Marxism, wasn't real Leninism, communism, socialism in China, and that we could actually pull it off in the Americas?
Yeah. Here we have to be careful about the definition of the concepts, majorly socialism and capitalism. By socialism, in Chinese context, in the context of Chinese politics, the socialism is early stage of communism. So typically, socialism requires a planned economy, requires the one-party rule, and Marxist Leninist ideology. That's socialism in the eye of the Chinese Communist Party. But in the United States and in European countries and many other countries, socialism has very different meaning. Like Bernie Sanders, like AOC, and the Social Democrats, they want more equality, and they are critical of the negative aspects of the modern capitalism, and they hope to have more social welfare, to give more opportunities to the poorest, the unprivileged people, and so that's understandable and that's desirable. I think for the past decades, most Western countries are going. Almost every Western countries is going towards more social welfare. Not only in Northern European countries, but every democratic countries, they can't be a single principle, single ideology of capitalism. Not a country is 100% capitalist. That must be a disaster. And then we can see the democratic countries have different policy, different level of social welfare. Like Norway, Sweden, Finland, these countries are sometimes called welfare state, but they still have a capitalist principle, and they have fundamental freedom. They have better protection of human rights, and some other countries don't have the high social welfare, but theoretically, it can be seen as public choice. People, if people have the right to vote, if people can choose from different parties, people have the right to express, and then some are right, some are left, some are more socialist, and some are more conservative, capitalist. That doesn't matter. And then the public choice, the free election will give an answer. Maybe these 4 years more left, those 4 years more right, more capitalist. That's okay. So then we can see it's very different from the Chinese context. And
do you worry about, whenever you institute a socialistic policy like a national healthcare system, do you worry a little bit about the expansion of government power that comes with it, and the chance that we might end up looking like a communist system or a socialist system, and that we might be moving in that direction?
Yeah, that's exactly many Chinese intellectuals, pro-democracy Chinese intellectuals are worrying about. So they accept kind of the theories like Hayek or Robert Nozick. They are in favor of the idea of minimum state, and they are very cautious of the expansion of governmental power, because many of them has suffered from the Chinese socialist system, the planned economy, and we had a unlimited government power and a single party. But in the context of Western countries, I think the Chinese intellectuals have exaggerated the seriousness of the problem. It's potentially problematic. Because if the tax is higher, if the government has a power to distribute the the welfare, and then the government becomes bigger, and then it can be a threat to private sphere, a threat to private life, and individual freedom. That's possible, but the democratic countries have system that can minimize the possibility of abusing power. As I have mentioned, there's separation of powers, there's judicial independence, there's free press, there's independent civil society, and people can. There are different parties competing in ideology and public policies. So we should not exaggerate the potential danger of welfare state. And as we have seen in northern European countries, Sweden, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Netherlands, and Iceland. So these countries have highest score not only in human rights and freedom, but also in democracy. So if we look at the number of democracy index, these countries are always the top 5, top 10, and it performs better than the United States. So first we have to think about the rights, the living standards of the poorest people in the society. Second, we have to strengthen the political mechanisms that can limit and monitor the government power, and then we don't need to be scared by the so-called expansion of government.
So there's one criticism that comes, especially from the right, where they say, and I don't really know whether I agree with this or not, but they say because in those Nordic countries, in the northern European states like the Finland, Norway, Sweden, that because they're homogenous, right, because they have a stronger communal state than we have, right? A stronger social, less social tensions, things like that, that their countries are allowed to flourish a lot easier and that they won't really have any struggles with that. I just wanted to sort of shift gears here and ask you, what do you feel about the social tensions that exist in America and how that affects pretty much everything?
Yeah. I'm not expert in Nordic countries, but it's a problem in many European countries that more and more migrants are coming, and so that's definitely a challenge to welfare state and social welfare policies. And I know in these Nordic countries, it's one of the most controversial state issues, and people are debating about these issues. It's between the the benefit, the current benefit, and like a universal value, like humanitarian values. It's not easy to choose. And in the United States, everyone knows the United States is one of the most open countries. It's a immigrant country. So not any other country like a United States has citizens of every race, every ethnicity, ethnicity. Yeah. So it's good, and generally speaking, immigrants, on the one hand, can bring a lot of opportunities. Some many famous superstars, big entrepreneurs, political figures are migrants. And on the other hand, it can also be a challenge for to social management and to the public policy, especially the welfare. So I think the Democrats and Republicans have different attitude towards the migrants, or the documented and the undocumented migrants. But what Donald Trump has been doing is trying to demonize the migrants, and he's not friendly to migrants, and he has brought more social attention in the United States, not only migrants, but the racial justice, as we have seen currently, the protest after the death of George Floyd.
Yeah. Do you where do you sort of stand on the racial justice issue? And also, if you were to design a perfect system in terms of, police brutality, and also in terms of just race relations in general in America, what do you think you would want to make it?
In reality, there's no such a thing as a perfect system, but the United States system regarding the racial issues is very problematic. Actually, I am in the center of the debate among Chinese intellectuals regarding the Black Lives Matter movement and the racial justice in the United States. It's very disappointing to me that many Chinese intellectuals and activists are against the Black Lives Matter, and they don't admit that the United States has systemic racism, and they even though they acknowledge there are discrimination against the Black people and the colored people, but there's no systemic discrimination. That's not true. And for the past decades, many American people, Black and white and other races, have been fighting for racial justice, and they have done a lot of prominent research. They have raised a lot of reasonable policy suggestions. But in practice, the progress that the United States has made is too limited. The institutional discrimination against the Black people is still serious. So we have several different levels in terms of constitution. It's not a problem. The people enjoy equal rights, and people. So the slavery system, the degradation system, have been abolished. So it's not a problem in the constitutional level. But in policy level, there are many existing policies which are in favor of the Black. Like.
Do you have any examples?
Yeah, like the police. Yeah, policing, like the employment, education, housing, and the career development, even the district, like election district. So there are many things the United States should improve, should reform.
So there was,
then there's a culture and social level, like interpersonal level. Many people still have bias against the Black, and the white supremacist is increasing in recent years, partly because of Donald Trump. So there are many things we can do, but it's not easy. There's a long way to go.
So there was one concern that a lot of people on the right have, and as someone who experienced Marxism itself, you probably have a very good understanding of sort of the dangers of this. But there was a podcast that went on a few years back after Black Lives Matter was created, but before the George Floyd incident happened, and it was the head of the Black Lives Matter movement. It was one of the co-founders, and they actually asked the founder, I forget her name, but I could drop the video in here, and they said that the Black Lives Matter movement is ran by these co-founders, and these co-founders are trained. They said that they were trained Marxists. So, do you think that there's a little fear amongst the people, amongst especially the Chinese intellectuals who have experienced Marxism, for them to be able to say, you know what, maybe Marxism was maybe the purpose of this Black Lives Matter movement is to create Marxism, even though it's under the guise of race relations and police brutality.
Yeah, I noticed the video of the Black Lives Matter founder, saying they are trained Marxist. But I don't know what was her exact meaning by saying trained Marxist.
Well,
And
so the
you
thing
know,
about it
it,
is they make sure in Marxism, right? A big influencer of Marxism is putting people together into group identities, and then from there using that to overthrow an oppressive system, right? So a lot of people are saying that
overthrow what?
overthrow an oppressive system, right? So because there's these race relations that are extremely tension filled. Some people are saying that they're using those race relations to put people into groups, right? And to get as many people on their group as possible. So then eventually they could use that to overthrow the system and do things of that sort. That's that's not something that has become apparent, but that is something that, you know, that is sort of characteristic of the Marxist ideology.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, I was born in a country of that's suffering a lot from Marxism ideology and the Communist Party, but we still need to be careful if we use the terminology Marxism. It can have very different meanings in different contexts. Um, it can mean like the Stalin, Lenin, Stalin, Mao Zedong, the planned economy, the dictatorship, the one-party rule, the suppression of freedom, the killings of political economies, political enemies. But it can also mean something else. In At least in theory, there's an academic branch of post-Marxism, and in theory, Karl Marx had different ideas between his when he was young and later. So as to my limited knowledge, Karl Marx has had the idea of alienation and humanism,
Yeah.
and also equality. So that's reasonable, and that had influence, like a profound influence to modern political system. No matter it's a socialist country or capitalist country, they have all been influenced by the idea of Marx. So that's one thing that we need freedom, but we also need equality. But these two most important values sometimes are in conflict. So maybe we should find a balance between freedom, market, and welfare and equality. Another thing is overthrowing the system. It depends. So if these people, the radical people, want to overthrow the current the current flawed system, which is very unfair to the black or the colored people. That's also reasonable. I think if they mean a radical reform, that's totally okay.
Yeah.
But if they mean they want to overthrow democratic system, if they want, if they say they want to establish uh, a political system without a party competition, without a free election, that's totally unacceptable, and people should not support these ideas. And in the United States and other Western democracies, at least to date, the democratic arrangement is powerful and stable. If you want to change the system, it's okay. You can establish your own party, and you advocate your own policy, and you attract members, and then you have the right, you have the opportunity to make your own party a very, very powerful one, and then you can become a mayor or a governor or congressman. That's possible. But if you want to establish a dictatorship, if you want to abolish the current democratic mechanism, that's not acceptable, and that's not possible in the foreseeable future. That's definitely not possible.
Do you have any sort of recommendations or problems with the current political system that we have, the current democracy, or do you think we've as an American system, we sort of pretty much got democracy right? Like it's a pretty strong foundation that we're sort of on, and then everything else needs fixing? Or do you think that our democracy and the sort of election system that we have is pretty stable?
In general, the American system is very healthy, it's very stable, but there are still some flaws, some problems. Again, I'm not an expert in American politics, but from the victory of Donald Trump, we can see some drawbacks of American system. He's kind of he has kind of authoritarian character, and he resorted to populism, and so and he has been trying to undermine the role of media and opposition party and the judicial system. So they maybe we need some reforms in electing systems. They make sure more people have the right to vote. For example, the many prisoners, people and people who have a criminal record are deprived of right to vote, and racial race is a serious problem in the United States.
Definitely.
We from the current discussion and previous research, we definitely need more reform in policing system, in like the criminal justice, and employment, and many other fields.
So actually, I have one more question, because I really don't want to. I don't want to take up too much of your time. And this was one thing that sort of had me really thinking, because I know you're talking about it, and Trump is getting a little. He's very authoritarian at times, and you feel like if he was in a Chinese system, right, where he had the ability to suppress speech, he probably there's a very good chance that he would have done things like he probably would have gotten rid of CNN and sort of influenced the system in ways that the Chinese Communist Party has done. So one thing that I know a little bit about, but not completely, and I think it's super interesting. Mao Zedong was the type of person who was incredibly authoritarian and suppressed speech in a way that was very murderous, because it ended up killing around 50 to 100 million people, estimate. And do you see that because of that suppressed speech, that people actually in China right now, do they actually support Mao Zedong? Do they feel like he was a great leader? Or do they sort of understand and recognize all the bad things that came with his rule and how authoritarian and murderous it was?
Yeah, Mao Zedong and the communist leaders had killed many millions of Chinese people, and people can be sentenced to death if they said a single sentence against the party or Mao Zedong, and the censorship on media, publishing, and education is very strict, so the Communist Party has twisted the history to a great extent, and so for many Chinese people, for majority of Chinese people, they don't know the real history. They don't know the responsibility that Mao Zedong and the Communist Party should take for the historic disaster, and Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong's cultural personality was so powerful and so deep that it still has influence today. So for many people, for experiencing Mao Zedong era, they still like Mao Zedong. They still admire Mao Zedong, and they don't think Mao Zedong is evil, is a bad leader. So that's half the propaganda and brainwashing work, and it's very effective.
So
and that's why.
You think that people don't actually, they like Mao Zedong because they don't know what he's done, instead of they don't like him despite what he's done.
They don't know what exactly happened in history, and for some of them, they knew what Mao Zedong and the Communist Party had done, but they accepted the theory and the discourse of the Communist Party that Mao Zedong did that, the Communist Party did that for the good of the Chinese people, and someone else like Si Renbang, the Gun of War, should be responsible for all the bad things happening in Mao era. So even for them, even though they knew the bad things in Mao Zedong era, they knew the bad things Mao Zedong had done, they still admire and like Mao Zedong because Mao Zedong is the savior of Chinese people, and Mao Zedong had done much more good things than bad things, and for some of them, they they don't have any thought about it. They love Mao Zedong naturally because when they were young, when they were educated, Mao Zedong was like a god, and they have been deprived of the capacity to challenge their god. The god can't be challenged. So for them, they will never challenge their own attitude towards Mao Zedong, and they're totally brainwashed.
Wow. That's a powerful way to end it. Thank you so much. If you want, can you say, you know, where people can get more of your content, get more of your information, social media, things of that sort?
Yeah, I have Twitter. My Twitter ID is Teng Biao, TengBiao, and I have Facebook. So look forward to meeting you at my social media.
All right, great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.